The US seizes a North Korean ship as tensions rise between the two countries. This after Pyongyang fired what appeared to be two short-range missiles, its second test in less than a week. After 8 months of relative calm, Syria's northwest is once again a theatre for bloody military operations. The forces of Bashar al-Assad have captured a strategic town in the province of Idlib from rebels. Also coming up this hour, this Friday, Emmanuel Macron marks France's National Day for the abolition of slavery. This is the 14th event of its kind, with the country's president paying tribute to the victims of the slave trade. Those are our top stories this hour on France 24. I'm Salam Chantier. Thank you for watching. We start with rising tensions between Washington and Pyongyang. This after North Korea fired two short-range missiles in its second weapons test in less than a week. That's according to US officials. The news comes 3 months after Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un failed to reach a nuclear agreement in Vietnam. Clément Bonnereau has the story.
A warning shot to US President Donald Trump as North Korea carried out its second weapons test in less than a week. The missiles were launched at 4:30 p.m. local time on Thursday, reaching an altitude of about 50 kilometers before falling into the Sea of Japan. It comes 5 days after Pyongyang fired several short-range missiles, the first missile launch since it tested an intercontinental ballistic missile in 2017. Speaking in Washington, Donald Trump was quick to describe the move as yet another provocation.
Nobody's happy about it, but we're taking a good look, and we'll see. The relationship continues, but we'll see what happens. I know they want to negotiate. They're talking about negotiating, but I don't think they're ready to negotiate.
Separately, on Thursday, the US said it had seized a North Korean cargo ship, accusing Pyongyang of violating international sanctions. The Wise Honest was allegedly used to export coal to China and other countries and was first seized in Indonesia last year. Thursday's events come amid worsening relations between the two countries. A meeting between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump ended without an agreement in February, with the US insisting North Korea dismantle its nuclear program and Pyongyang demanding relief from international sanctions.
Now to another war of words that has been playing on the international stage. This time between Washington and Beijing after trade negotiators failed to reach an 11th hour breakthrough on Thursday, but talks are continuing this Friday as the US pulls the trigger on an increase in tariffs on Chinese products. Beijing, for its part, has vowed to hit back. Meanwhile, here in France, Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire has said that this escalation poses the gravest threat to global growth and threatens jobs across Europe. Here's our reporter, Charles Pellegrin, with the latest on Beijing's reaction.
Chinese Ministry of Commerce quickly replied to this tariff hike, saying that they deeply regretted it and saying that they would have to take necessary countermeasures. Now, this means a matching tariff hike on American goods entering the Chinese market, but it could also be non-tariff barriers, like, for instance, increased customs scrutiny for American goods entering China, or an increased regulatory enforcement, so random inspections for any American firms that are implanted in China. But there could be a number of different ways in which they can hurt the American economy. For instance, they can target battleground states for Donald Trump's re-election in 2020. For instance, stopping the purchase of American soybeans from states like Iowa. They can also call on the patriotism of their citizens by calling on customer boycotts of American products like iPhones, for instance. And there's another tool that they could use is simply currency devaluation to compensate the price hike that would come with these tariffs.
Charles Pellegrin reporting there. In other world news, Syrian troops have captured a northwestern village, that's Qalat al-Madir. This as they continued to push into a remaining rebel-held enclave in the Idlib province. The latest wave of fighting that began last week is seen as the most serious challenge yet to a ceasefire in the area, which was brokered by Turkey and Russia 8 months ago.
It's the last rebel-held stronghold in Syria, Home to 3 million people, Idlib has been a refuge for tens of thousands of displaced fighters and civilians in recent years. The province is not controlled by a single group, but the dominant force is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a jihadist group linked to al-Qaeda and previously known as the al-Nusra Front. Located in northwestern Syria along the border with Turkey, Idlib province straddles major highways running south from Aleppo to the capital Damascus and west to the port city of Latakia, which is home to a large Russian airbase. After 8 years of war, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is determined to retake the province and crush the Syrian rebellion once and for all. Government troops launched a new offensive on the 30th of April, breaking a ceasefire brokered in September by Russia, which backs President Assad, and Turkey, which supports the opposition. Moscow has provided air support, while at the same time advising against a full-scale attack. Turkey, meanwhile, has opposed the move, fearing a major influx of Syrian refugees.
Turkey is home to 3.5 million Syrian refugees. Our country does not have the resources nor the power to take in another 3 million people. We must do whatever we can to prevent migration from this area.
The UN, meanwhile, has warned of a major humanitarian disaster, saying that the violence in Idlib displaced over 150,000 people in the past week alone.
Turning our attention to Sudan, where protesters who ousted former President Omar al-Bashir are now locked in a standoff with the country's new military rulers. Frustrated by a lack of progress, the opposition movement is now calling for what it refers to as a nationwide civil disobedience campaign. Here's France 24's Nadia Massi reporting from the capital, Khartoum.
Civil disobedience is the word they're talking about here on the streets. The plan is to move the protest beyond this site just outside the military headquarters in the centre of Khartoum and across Sudan. A general strike could be rolled out as early as Monday, and the plan being to kind of grind the civil administration of this country to a halt. Junior police officers have already gone on strike, and the plan is to perhaps see people like airport workers strike as well, those working in the post office, those working in the national train service as well. And I suppose the key question here, though, is will that alienate Sudanese who haven't participated yet in these protests, or will that encourage them to come on board? Now, I asked a couple of protesters when I was at this sit-in last night, when it was really thronging with people in the evening, and a couple of them did acknowledge that it may backfire, but they said given that there is such a stalemate at the moment in those negotiations with the military to try and form a civilian administration, they felt they had no choice but to take this protest further and stretch it across Sudan.
Next, we'll cross to Brazil, where the former president Michel Temer was arrested for a second time on corruption charges on Thursday. This is a sign that the former leader may be running out of moves in the face of a sprawling probe that has roiled South America's largest country. According to the prosecutors, the construction company paid Temer bribes in exchange for a contract to build a nuclear power plant in the southern part of the Rio de Janeiro state. In Venezuela, there are now 3 opposition representatives that are taking refuge inside a foreign embassy. The latest being Richard Blanco, who is currently reported to be inside the Argentinian embassy in the capital, Caracas. This comes after the arrest of a top opposition leader in Venezuela, which has unleashed fears of a wider crackdown. Meanwhile, opposition leader Juan Guaido has announced new nationwide protests on Saturday, following clashes between police and protesters last week, which left 6 people dead.
Taking refuge in the Argentinian embassy in a bid to avoid arrest. Richard Blanco is one of the top deputies of Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido. Blanco said his life was in danger because of President Nicolas Maduro's intelligence agents, who have started detaining Guaido's allies. On Wednesday, Edgar Zambrano was the first opposition lawmaker arrested since a failed uprising against the government led by Guaido last week that Maduro has called an attempted coup d'etat.
This has been part of the dismantling of the rule of law in Venezuela. If we can speak of a coup d'etat here, it's the absolute dismantling of the rule of law of the national parliament, the only legitimate and recognized institution in the world.
The arrest has been condemned by most of the roughly 50 countries who recognize Guaido as the leader of Venezuela. Argentina and Peru took to Twitter to condemn the actions. Statements also echoed by U.S. President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, at a graduation ceremony for medical students, Maduro accused Washington of sabotage.
It's a brutal, criminal, abnormal, inhuman sabotage of all the supplies we import.
Maduro claims the anti-government protests are part of a U.S.-backed effort to oust him. Amid the crackdown on the opposition, the Supreme Court has stripped some 10 pro-Guaido lawmakers of their diplomatic immunity. They are now facing charges of conspiracy, rebellion, and treason.
Now, this Friday, France is commemorating the abolition of slavery. During the 18th and 19th centuries, the country was among the major European slave trading nations, capturing and selling some 1.4 million people before leaders outlawed slavery in 1848. The day, which was first introduced in 2006, is the same date France officially recognized that slavery as a crime against humanity. But critics say it's done little beyond that. Now, at the start of the ceremony, as you can see in these images here, France 24's Andrew Hillier sent us this update.
So the official ceremony just getting underway here in Paris's Luxembourg Gardens. The French President Emmanuel Macron has just arrived. Behind me, he's been shown an exhibition on the depiction of slavery, which was put together by the Musée d'Orsay. Of course, this is the first time that Emmanuel Macron has presided over this annual ceremony. Last year, it was the French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe who was here. Other notable events we're expecting today, several musical renditions, several readings of colonial literature. There'll be a rendition of the Black Marseillaise, which is an alternative to France's national anthem. We're also expecting the official announcement of the creation of the Foundation for the Memory of Slavery. That will be announced by France's former Prime Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault. Other French ministers present, of course, the French Minister for Overseas Territories, and, of course, France's Education Minister, Jean-Michel Blanquer. His presence, of course, very important here today. There's a lot of school children who are here at the ceremony, and in classrooms up and down the country, not just here in Paris, of course, a special effort being made to examine and really reflect on France's role in slavery and the abolition of the slave trade.
Andrew Hillier reporting that. Do make sure you tune into France 24 at around midday Paris time, when we'll be bringing you a special edition on this commemoration ceremony. Now, also here in France, President Emmanuel Macron is expected to meet with Facebook chief executive, that's Mark Zuckerberg, this Friday. On the agenda, regulating hate speech on social media. This 6 months after Paris and the tech giant launched a partnership under which French regulators and Facebook employees have worked together on removing harmful content on the site. But observers say banned material continues to slip through the cracks.
It's the kind of Facebook video many users have seen. The feature takes a year of a user's content and auto-generates a video. But this one is different than most, with black jihadi flags and anti-Semitic verses. For Facebook critics, this feature is a problem.
You can see balloons covering up all kinds of horrible images of terrorists on the ground doing horrible things. And that's not created by the people expressing affiliation with terrorism. It's created by Facebook itself.
A whistleblower's complaint to the U.S. government, reviewed by the Associated Press, shows that banned content, such as terrorist propaganda, often goes undetected by Facebook regulators. This means such content is treated like other normal posts on the platform, shared in news feeds and recommended by algorithms. In the face of criticism, The tech giant says it's developed artificial intelligence, or AI tools, to detect and remove violent posts.
Terrorist content, for example, where we now have AI systems that can identify and take down 99% of the Al-Qaeda and ISIS-related content in our system before someone, a human, even flags it to us.
Facebook's hate speech struggles have led to a series of scandals in recent years, most recently in March, when the Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand were live streamed on the platform.
Well, that's it from us. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned.